All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's do this. Let's look at Connor beating StarCraft Alternate, the final mission, in a pre-alpha, unfinished build. So, for those who are uninitiated and unfamiliar, StarCraft Alternate is a campaign originally by Stratos Tygo that was basically flipping the perspective of three different, or like the vanilla campaigns. So, the first three. And basically, what you had was the Terran campaign if it were played by Zerg, or if you were Zerg instead of Terran, stuff like that. And so the whole thing was rotated somehow. UD Commander picked it up to make a Brood War version and to update the first three vanilla campaigns with modding and stuff, and it's a remastered compatible project, which means it's shit. But don't take it from me. Feel free to play it yourself or look up some playthroughs from DK, Connor himself on Home of StarCraft. I'm sure there's a couple of other playthroughs out there, like Jay Barino or something you can go find. Now, this is the final mission of the entire production, which UD Commander asked me to make many moons ago, and here I am with an actual build after all of these months. And basically, since it is remastered, my limitations are that I cannot tell the AI to scale up and place buildings in a very exquisite fashion. I can't have them do too many super intelligent things with their units. There are certain things that are just not compatible with the remaster compared to what is compatible with the version, the most stable version of the game, 161. And so I was definitely limited in some respects, and other limitations were imposed just by the design of the mission. You have certain players, certain figures in the story that need to be represented here. And so that's basically the rub of it. But Connor here has played this a few times, and the factions are himself as Purple Protoss. I think he's being controlled by Duran or something, but there's no dialogue in it yet because that's UD Commander's job. Then you got the red Infinity Swarm, which is in the upper right-hand corner. Orange, which you have shared vision of, is not your ally, as you saw Connor fighting him earlier. He's actually an enemy player, but he will never attack you, at least until, all of the enemy AI are taken care of, if he somehow managed to survive that long. As you can see, he's put on pressure from many different AI. There's a total of 6 enemies that are not orange, and then orange is the 7th. And so basically he's just sort of, he's not allied with you, but he's not overtly going to organize an attack against you. So he's mostly just trying to survive. And then you've got the Feral Zerg, which is this mud purple color that you see Connor fighting now. The only noteworthy element that they have is that they have Feral Guardians, which are just stronger Guardians. I'm not sure if they deal more damage and have more health, but they have some stat increase. There's no change in gameplay behavior from what I understand. And so they train those directly from Greater Spires, I believe, because, again, in 1.16.1, you can just tell the AI, or you can make the tech tree such that it morphs units directly, like you could morph a larva into a Kakalza, and then morph a Kakalza into a Guardian Hero, which is also called Kakalza. And that would actually allow you to do it a bit more organically than just having them, essentially, I mean, it is through the AI, so it's not like they're being spawned through triggers, but it does feel a little bit weirder to have them being trained directly from something that isn't conventionally a factory, or not giving them a custom factory or something like that for it. But either way, that's just what it ended up being. So I guess it gives the AI more of an incentive to train them from, or to construct additional Greater Spires, right? So there is that, I suppose. But yeah, that's the extent of it. Up in the top left-hand corner, those are the Primal Zerg. I'll get into those in a moment, because as we see, Connor is doing battle with many Guardians and infantry squad from blue, who are, I believe, just standard UED. Brown is the Confederate resistance forces, or Confederate remnants, alongside some UED forces. And so they mostly, they don't use Brood War technology for the most part. I think the UED are how they got their funding, or they're allied with the UED or something. But the way that the AI works is that they primarily focus on handling mech units. And so you see some infantry here, but their pièce de résistance is the tank spam that they will eventually start using, as well as heavy battlecruiser presence with very defensively oriented science vessels. So their science vessels are very selfish with their spellcasting. So all you'll see them do is defense matrix their own units, and maybe some allied units, but they won't irradiate or EMP. That's dedicated with blue. Blue will do the sort of offensive spellcasting a bit more aggressively. Now, let's talk about the primals. They are the last player here, and then we will be fully briefed, I guess. So the primals are the green ones. The primals in general have their own sort of custom tech tree. It doesn't use custom graphics because there are none, I guess, that are compatible with Remastered that UED wanted to use. And so, as a result, they are standard assets, which is pretty unfortunate, but they do use distant or different projectiles than conventional Hydralisks and Mutalisks, as you saw there briefly. And one thing that they do is that, their units do serve like different sort of purposes than what you might be expecting. However, at the same time, they are a little bit weirder in terms of the spellcasting. Here we go. A giant fight with a large number of guardians. So this means that he definitely has his expansion. When the first build of this was active, most of the attacks were coming from the main thread. But one of the things that I ended up doing as a change in pace was making it so that the expansions were a bit more valuable in terms of the attacks that they added. That way, even though the AI can't just be... it cheats with money in this because, again, with the limitations of Remastered, it's a lot more challenging to, make the AI behave a bit more reasonably and a bit more fairly. And because of that, we're basically, stuck with doing these boilerplate workarounds, telling the AI to... basically gimp itself and not use its resource stockpile as efficiently if it doesn't have expansions. So that's the workaround that I ended up using. And so when you get hit by an attack that has like 9 guardians like that one, it's like a telegraph that their expansion is active. And Connor seems to understand this to some degree. So he's actually going to be moving to take his own expansion. Now the early game isn't really super interesting or important. It's mostly going to be overwhelming for players who haven't seen this before, just because of the sheer number of things that are happening on the map. And if you expand a little slowly, like Connor has here, you do run the risk of not having enough map control. In the final build, Orange is actually going to contest that expansion for you and stay alive a little bit longer. What ends up happening as a result of that is, obviously that starts to choke out the number of resources that you have access to. So you don't want that to happen, obviously, but it's also a matter of like sort of plugging holes in a ship. There's going to be certain holes that need to be plugged, and you got to find out which ones, what order of that, how serious is hole A compared to hole B or whatever, and you got to try to figure that out. It's basically a foregone conclusion that you are going to be losing some things. You're going to have to rebuild a bunch of cannons. You're going to have to rebuild your army. You're going to have to remax a few times. That's definitive. There's not really any getting around that. So, you might even have to rebuild expansions after losing them because the resources are still there, even though you set up a bunch of cannons like what Connor's doing here. I don't know if that happens in this particular playthrough. I haven't actually seen this. But that is the main idea behind a lot of this. It's more so a war of attrition than it is necessarily a war of decisive maneuvers, at least in the early stages of the game, the middle stages of the game, where you're gonna start bleeding from many different orifices, right? Many different directions, as they start to pour in. Now Orange has been reduced from the proud situation that they had been in before, where they had structures all over the place and were providing vision for you. It feels a lot more empty, or not necessarily empty, actually. It feels full of enemies, but it feels a lot less safe now, looking at this mini-map, seeing all of the enemies streaming in from all sides, but without any forewarning. So Connor's actually dying to some of these. I think they are literally called destroyers, which I will never stop giving UED shit for, because anytime you have like these action verb names instead of actual names of units, it's hilarious. I kind of like the High Templar Storm inside cannons approach. I might have to adopt that in my Protoss playthroughs. It's pretty neat. When you're going to get attacked from a certain direction, basically you turn High Templar into static defense. It's pretty cool. I suppose it's useful. You just don't want to storm your own workers. Now, Oh, there's a Jay Barino up there. Oh, see you later, dude. Nice. Thank you for guest starring in my video. Aw, man. He's stuck. Idiot. So, the frame in the top right-hand corner, I just noticed that. I'm so used to that being there. That tells you what frame of the game you are on. So you divide that by 1440, and you get the amount of elapsed time, or in minutes. So, for 1,000, or, yeah, 1,440 is a minute in frames. And so, yeah, Connor's lasted 30,000 frames, whatever that translates to. I think that is about roughly 20 minutes. Here comes the plague. This is sort of like the calm before the storm, where the AI are all simultaneously hitting some longer waits before they start really smashing out a bunch of attacks that are a little bit higher. I think some of them are entering into their loops at this point. It really just depends on the AI. Brown, for example, has really only attacked once that you've seen. There's obviously an attack that probably went to orange at some point, but they have very long delays, however very sizable attacks compared to, red and even mud, who has some sizable attacks but lower or increased frequency. Blue's more of a pushover into the final loop anyways. He's also setting up a bunch of expansions, which will give him a bit of an extra strength. But it appears that Connor has been able to push into red. So, it looks like red doesn't have enough production. I like the Storms on carriers. That's very cute. Good job, Connor. So this will probably be some additional resources for Connor if he wants to expand here. That's another thing, is that basically every expansion is attempted to be taken by one AI or another. For example, the one in the far left on the minimap is taken by green, but if you destroy the primal base, then mud tries to take it. And so it's just a matter of who gets there first in some cases. Connor's actually at max supply right now, so he's feeling pretty strong. And there probably is going to be, going to need to be some retooling, like maybe red shouldn't fall over quite so easily. But that is the rare decisive moment. And I just got done talking about attrition, and then Connor is like, haha, I have 200 supply. So there goes that. Lockdown is a great spell. Normally, you won't see too many moves. Oh, that's not good. Oh man. So anyways, normally you won't see like too many. I don't even remember what I was talking about. That Overlord really destroyed me. Oh well, if I think about it again, I will return to it. Primals are spinning. There's an expansion. Yeah, red never took this, so might be a script issue. I'll take a look at that later on. That's how you know it's not finished. Players not getting annihilated immediately at frame 1, so it must not be done. No, this is where, if you leave your flanks undefended or unattended to for too long. Oh, so many probe kills. That you can see where this could get pretty dicey. Yellow is like barely attacks. He's not really meant to be an attacking player. However, if Connor ends up going over to the top left at any point soon, he will probably meet about 10,000 static defense structures constructed by a yellow. That's a good bit. Had some difficulty with that initially. Necron was able to find a solution to that. That's pretty cool. I don't really fully understand why it didn't work before, but it probably has something to do with the fact that the primals use a different worker, but that worker on remastered can't morph into structures the way drones can, and can't build them the way SCVs can, can't warp them in the way probes can. So there's no way for it to construct. Oh no, the Guardians. Oh shit. Oh, bye. Oh no, not his production. Oh man, this hurts. But I think Connor wins this. Pretty sure he does. He said he won. So I'll take his word for it. There's a Maelstrom. It's not his. That is the beautiful remastered compatible spellcasting. That's what that is. What was I saying? Fuck. So, yes, static defense. Primals have it. Workers, primals have it. Problem is they can't really build structures without using standard drones. So, Orange has survived for quite a bit. The solution to this is basically to make it so that there are attacks manually set up to target Orange later on. And if Orange is going to stay alive, not longer than this, but longer, like maybe about 20 minutes is probably when they will be removed from the game. That'll give you more of an indirect way to take a look at the attacks and compositions and strategies of the various various AI. Hey, that was a cool sacrificial storm. Good reactions. So basically, Orange is meant to be a buffer, since as you can see, it gets pretty crazy in the late game. You know, you got units of all sorts flying around. And I remember what I was going to talk about earlier, but I'll get to that in a second. So, or I'll forget again. Either way, basically, you want the player to be able to witness what the AI are going to use as tools against them. The problem is getting to the point where they can do that without, without being too distracted by all of the craziness in the early stages of the game. And that is pretty difficult to do from a design standpoint, like tutorializing all the different AI and all their different strategies. But one of the things that I went ahead and did was, I proposed that Orange was, I think, initially supposed to be owned by the player, actually, just a bunch of random cannons and stuff. I proposed that it was an AI ally, and UAD Commander, I think, suggested that instead of an AI ally, it be an AI enemy, but you have shared vision of them because of some story justification. So, obviously I'm not here to give story pointers. I'm here to make a map, so just sort of did what he asked. And I think that whatever the story justification is, as long as it results in this not feeling too out of place, I think that's fine. Looks like Connor's going for Mud's expansion, or maybe Blue's. So the reason why there's so many lockdowns, that's what I was going to talk about. Blue actually locks down pretty heavily because of the way that the AI works on Remastered. You can change this on 161. It is a default 161 as well. But the unit AI works in mysterious ways. It's a little divine. Basically, if you order a spellcaster or a unit that has a spell to attack, like say a queen, right? Queen has Parasite, Queen has Ensnare, Queen has Broodling. If you add one queen, you add a queen to an attack, then that queen will be told to cast its spell. I don't know if it's immediately. I haven't really studied the behavior too extensively. But what I do know is they basically are told to attack. They follow the attack wave, I think, and hang back a little bit, but they do aggressively use whatever spell they are normally using or they have energy for. Like usually they'll sometimes they pick a queen that has only 75 energy or something, so they don't have enough for Broodling. But they do have enough to Ensnare or Parasite, so they use one of those. So the reason why Blue is doing that so much is because even though their idle order spellcasting AI is telling them, hey, we don't need to use lockdowns so frequently. It's like maybe twice or 3 times a minute maximum. Like in the late game, I think it scales up. What is happening is that they have like attack add 7 ghosts in there somewhere. And so 7 different ghosts are getting the order to not only come with the attack because they have a weapon, but also cast their spell because they have lockdown. And so that's what you see. That is a little frustrating to play against as Protoss, but I think they all have different elements of to them. Like all of the different AI have different things that you want to deny. Like the primals have their weird tech tree that maybe you're not super familiar with, so you want to try to focus them down. But Brown has a bunch of siege tanks, as you're seeing now. Mud has a bunch of guardians. Blue has a bunch of ghosts that lock you down, right? And there's a bunch of different things. Oh, now Orange is trying to manage their attacks in a very silly way, which happens to be done by going through Connor's base. Very unfortunate. That's why Orange is not really meant to survive for too long. That is an unintended feature. Some would call that a bug, but I am Blizzard Entertainment. I don't know if you knew that, so it's actually not. So yeah, there you go. That's the explanation as to why blue gets locked down. But I do think it's okay in that case. Like, you can choose to focus down blue pretty early on. I was actually thinking he has some hero units that are meant to be elite units. They're using hero units for the purpose. Obviously, the AI doesn't use them for defense or anything, although I could make it so that they do. But one thing that I was thinking of is they just have them pre-placed. I think if I tell UD Commander to add an exception for them to be trained by the AI in Firegraft through the one of the modding tools, basically telling the AI you can build these, telling any player who that they can build these. They don't, as long as they don't have the button, the human players won't be able to interact with it. But if the AI has the permissions, they don't need a button, obviously, so they just do it if they are ordered to. And what I would do then is periodically have them train those hero units. Like, maybe they start out with some of them, and then the remaining ones that UD Commander wants to have, they just train over time. That way you can do some early action against them. Because one thing that is missing right now is that, like, you know, you can do what Connor set up to do here, where he basically just uses the early game to annihilate his base with photon cannons. So he's not really doing anything aggressive. He's mostly just sticking around for the purpose of what's it called? He's like playing for the late game more so, and he's like getting a bunch of expansions, as you can see here, and you know, slowly grinding over. He's completely annihilated mud at this point, so there's no more guardian spam that he has to worry about. Obviously, red is also dead, so the only guardians that you're going to see are those weird primal destroyers. And now he's descending upon blue, who, as you can see, has a very, very stacked base, chock full of production structures. I think breaking the Terran players are probably the more challenging of any of the individual AI to break, just because of the way that their defenses are laid out, and I'm okay with that. The commands to defend in the script are kind of like that. Though at this point, I feel like at least blue might not have an answer to Mass Storm the way that Connor is doing them. But it will probably be, you know, he won't be able to win with just this small force that he's gathered up here. He's going to have to send these reinforcements over. I guess he's trickling them into the expansion. But he won't be able to wipe out blue just with that. The thing is, even though it seemed pretty hard to probably the layman or the uninitiated at the beginning of the map, you see like the sheer number of enemy AI that you've got to deal with and all of the crazy shit that's going on. Connor's demonstrating here that even though he was, you know, he self-admitted as well, he was pretty sloppy with the way that this ended up going down, that it makes a bit more sense that he would you know, have struggled a little bit longer. Like, he probably could have beaten this mission in this state a lot sooner if you know, if he wasn't dealing with quite so many losses all around the map. You know, the map has that chaotic quality to it that I kind of like, where, you know, there's like all of these small skirmishes also all around the map, and definitely feels like a free-for-all in a way, even though most of the forces are allied against you. There's just so many different things happening at the same time. It's definitely something you got to keep track of. Random fucking primal leader. The primal chitin. Looks like green set up their expansion, but didn't defend it too heavily. Might have to look into that as well. Radiate! Just suicides it into a bunch. It's like lightning shield in Warcraft 3 or something. It's pretty sick. But yeah, Connor is demonstrating here that even if your micro isn't perpetually on point, you can just macro up as long as you have like 10 gateways or 16 or however many he has now. You know, macro is the answer. So just secure some expansions. Hold out in the early game if you want to, or if you're a more micro-oriented player, you can try to power forward and you know, wipe out one of the AI almost completely in the early game. So again, I don't know if that's how supported that will be in the final build, but I do want that to be the case. I want there to be a way for players to be able to show their early game chops, their micro chops, or, as Connor's demonstrating here, the advantages of the macro focus. And I feel like so far this map does do that. It just doesn't feel like doesn't feel quite complete yet. There's definitely some specific things I want to change about the way that the map is going so far. But Connor's got 10k in the bank. Definitely seems like the rest of the map is a foregone conclusion, which is one of the things that I would like to change as well. Obviously, if only one of the 7 AI or 6 AI that are allied against you are still alive, might not make any sense to expect that one AI out of 7 to remain able to kill you. I guess it really just depends on how many resources that you have. But would be nice to add a little bit more to the stake. Still make you work for it even after you've done your due diligence wiping out, 5 out of the 6 enemies. But I guess we'll find out how that ends up being dealt with in the later builds. This is pretty close to the final build, though, even though there's still... I beat it, I'm going to end it here. Yeah, there you go, dude. Good job, Connor. Oh, man. Well, yeah, that was it, man. That was my overview of alternates so far. That's where we're going. Basically, the changes that I need to make are to make sure that the AI are a bit more resilient in some cases. That obviously I've got to streamline orange a lot. But hopefully that this overview, this VOD of me talking over a double speed of Connor's VOD was enlightening in some respect, to the point where you learned a thing or two about level design, or at the very least it was enough to satisfy somebody's curiosity. Obviously, if you have any questions, or if you want to follow up on one of the things that I started to say and then got distracted about because I'm fucking tired, then feel free to post in the comments. But I was thinking about doing this earlier, and I'm glad I did now. So there you go. Big kisses.